Uh-oh.
Alright, so we're back on the build for Vic. Once again, sponsored by Three Monkeys Solderless, right? So go check us out at threemonkeyssolderless.com. Best sounding audio cable, two different types. The triax high bandwidth with extra shielding and a different copper composite, as well as the standard cable, which sounds awesome as well. Thickest on the solderless market. No wire stripping. None of that. Just cut and screw them on. Good to go. Alright, so where did we leave off last time was getting this side of the amp basically completed. Right? So we have the power transformer wired in. We have our filter banks ready to go for our high volts all right off the rectifier. We have our screens, filter supplies. We have our phase inverter supply, and we have our preamp filter supplies all ready to go. We have our output transformer wired in, primaries, secondaries, paying attention to all the good things, phase. We have the secondary, the selector switch wired in, our output jacks wired in. And it's at this point where I would start to want to put the board in, put in potentiometers, things like that. But I think it's always a good idea right around this time to just make sure that all of this is functioning right. So we're going to test it. So we don't have the rectifier in yet, but we're going to see that the secondaries on the output or on the power transformer are producing the voltages that we would expect. So that way we know we have all of this wired up correctly. The light goes on, the switches work, all that good kind of stuff. So start off, I'm going to basically put a fuse in the fuse holder for the mains. Not putting it into the high volt yet because we don't really need that. And I grab my meter, right? So I'm going to grab my meter. We're going to set that, where can we put it so we can see it? Yeah, you can see that, I think, there. We're going to put it on AC voltage. And then we're going to measure the, let's say the high volts from the center tap to a leg of the high volt. So I'm going to grab, I got some alligator clips around here. Here's one. All right, so I'm going to take this alligator clip. This will be the ground, or rather it'll be on the center tap, right? Because I don't want to futz around too much with poking around. What I'm going to do is just basically look at it real quick. And then we're going to attach this to the other alligator clip up to the one of the legs of the high volt wind on the power transformer. And then we're going to make sure that every other wire, well, that's not it. This one is it. Every other wire is not going to be touching the chassis. That shouldn't be, because we don't like to melt things in sparks. All right, so let's grab a power cord. And we'll just go ahead and test it. So I'm going to put the switch on. And it is. All right, so I'm just going to plug this into my wall outlet here. And we're going to watch for the appropriate voltage here. 183. Good. So basically that means that we guessed correctly that there is a need for a voltage doubler. Yeah, we actually saw that though too in the diagram, so that's fine when we looked at the diagram for the color code. So it looks like we got everything set up pretty good over here. All right, so I'm confident that was the lamp on. Yep, the lamp's on. Yeah, I think everything's looking pretty good here. So let's go ahead and unplug it. All right, and now we can start, or rather continue with the build. So it looks like we got everything set up good. So I think at this point, I'm probably going to want to put in the potentiometers. Right now is a good time to do that. So I'm going to grab some potentiometers and some of my nut drivers. So let's start doing that. All right. So we also have to build the Jose Master before we can do before we can put all the pots in, right? Because we're going to want to put the ground bus on that as well. So you know what? Let's build the master volume unit for the Jose. So let me move this whole assembly out of the way here. And we'll put it over on the floor. There we go. And then I'm going to grab some stuff and set up to build the master volume assembly. So give me 1 second and let me grab some things and put them all here. I am unprepared. All right, so I've assembled all the parts that I need to put together the Jose master volume. We have our dual ganged double pull, double throw, push pull potentiometer mounted on this piece of phenolic to help keep it in place while we work on it. I got my 0.22 capacitor, my 10K resistor, my 2 Zeners, a little bit of heat shrink, and a tag strip. So we're going to start with the tag strip. I'm going to grab my fret nips and I'm going to start preparing the tag strip by cutting off what I don't need, which are these guys, right? These little tags. And then I'm going to trim it down to size, right? And I'm going to remove this one right here because we don't need it. And I'm going to trim it down. There we go. Now I'm going to mount my components on there. First thing being the 0.22. I'm going to grab my little guys here and straighten out the legs so I got a little bit of a little bit more length to them. Now I'm going to mount them right between the middle big lug right there, right? You big lug. So that's where that one's going to go. But probably, you know, before we do that, let's put the 10K on, because that one doesn't really want to stay in place too well. It's more difficult. So we put our 10K on the last two, right? Put that in, bend our leads over, so it keeps that in place. And now we can put the 0.22 in, which extends from the 10K to the edge right there, right? So now we can go ahead and solder everything home. Right, get a little solder in there. Move that out of the way. There we go. Right, so all the pieces are soldered. I'm going to trim off the excess lead off the 10K. That's in there, and this is what we end up with, right? Okay, so next I got to mount this on the pot, right? So I'm just going to secure the pot in the vise here to hold it still. I'm going to put just a little bit of solder on the corner here, and I'm going to tin up the L part, the fastener part of the assembly of the tag strip, right? I'm going to drop it on the table, and then I'm going to solder it on to the potentiometer, right? So I'm just going to heat it up. And there we go. Okay, so that's together. Now we have the beginnings of the assembly, right? So I'm now going to mount this right into the vise to hold it in place. So now I can work on it and it'll stay in place and won't flop all over the place, right? So we're going to start wiring this up to the switch, but first we're going to take our Zeners, right? So we're going to take these guys. Now we're going to orientate them so the bands are pointing away from one another and twist them together on the other side. And then solder that junction, right? Now I'm going to clip off the leads, the excess lead there, So we end up with something that looks like this, all right? I'm gonna grab a little piece of heat shrink, and I'm gonna cut it to size, right around here looks good. All right, and I'm gonna slip it over the diodes. Now I'm gonna grab my heat gun, and we're gonna shrink it down. There we go. So we have that ready. And now we can pretty much start wiring up all the different connections here. So let's start. We'll use different colors, and we're using like a thin gauge wire that works really well with the switch. Which is 22 gauge, excuse me, 24 gauge, I believe is what we're using, is it? Is that right? Yeah, 24 gauge. And I'm gonna have to turn on the light. I apologize, but I can't see. It's too dark in here, so hopefully this won't blow everything up too bad. But I definitely need to be able to see to build this, because it's pretty intricate. Okay. So I'm pretty much just doing this from memory. But this is the same little master volume unit that's in every one of those Jose preamp pedals that I made and make still. So I've done this more than once, let's say. So it pretty much sticks in your head after a little while of how exactly everything goes together. Go. Taking this little scrap of lead right there off the 10K. We're going to use it. To connect the switch to the center lug here. is going to be our ground right here. Oop. And we can bring that around to solder onto the pot, so we'll just leave that hanging. Now we're going to grab our Zener assembly. So you can see how handy it is to have like a vise. I'm going through the bottom there. I was wondering why this looks kind of not quite right. There we go. I was struggling with it a little bit there. The vise really helps hold everything in place while you're working, right? I couldn't do this. Sort of, you know, sometimes they refer to it as a third arm. And it really is. Go. Okay, so that side is ready. Some white wire. And we're going to have actually 2 leads coming off of this one. So I want to strip it just a little bit more off of this. There we go. Just crimping it on there. Okay, so the white's going to go over to the treble control, right, as part of the master, and the yellow here is going to go to this other section of the switch, the top, right? neaten that up a little bit. Okay, so I'm gonna leave a little bit, I'm gonna leave this out. So we figure, grab a ruler, how far it's gotta go over the treble control, right? So just to give us an idea, right? So the spacing on the amplifier between the potentiometers should be 1 1/4 inches, 1.5 inches. So we're gonna go, so this is, it'll be a master, bass, right? Middle, treble. So we'll bring it out just so we have a little extra to play with, about that long. That should give us plenty to get to where we need to go. This particular wire here will go back to the board. So we're going to need to grab some yellow. Right, so this is going to connect back to basically the tone stack, right at the junction of the treble capacitor and the 33K slope resistor. Now I'm going to grab some red. Now, excuse me, that's actually going to the phase inverter. This is going back to that junction. Just trim off that. Okay. So I'm going to leave these uncut for right now, and I'm going to just pull this out of the vise, reserve that to the side, make a little bit of room here for the chassis to come back in. Remove the vise. Grab the chassis and put it back on the bench. All right. Nice. Take our potentiometer off our board. How are we doing on time? About 17 on this one, so we're probably closing in on enough for this episode. But let me just mount this where it goes. All right, so the master volume is right here, and what was the presence control. All right, that's the way that Jose used to do it. Gonna not tighten it, but just get it where it needs to be. Right, so we're going to be bringing this over to our treble pot, right? So that's good. This one here is going to come basically down the chassis, and we're going to bring it over to the board. So let's get the board in roughly. Get this out of the way. Right, dealing with a real hairy mess here for the time being. So as time goes on, it gets neater, and that's upside down too. Get this out of the way. All right. We're just getting approximate lengths so that we don't end up just a little short of wire wherever we're going. And it's going to go right here. All right. So I think it's safe to cut it here. That'll give us a few extra inches just in case. And then we have this right here, which is going back to the phase inverter, which we can wrap underneath the unit, like so. Make sure this is all lined up. The entrance to the phase inverter being here. We're going to run it down this way and come over. So let's cut it like around here. I think that's good right there. Okay. So that Jose Master is ready to go. So now we can, I think let's put in the pots and then we can call it a video, right? Because we're probably over 30 minutes by now, I'm thinking. After doing the testing and then building the little unit and all that good stuff. All right, so let me get my hardware. I need some lock washers, some 3/8 lock washers. So I got my bag of lock washers here, and we'll just start mounting all the parts in. Starting with the heart of the beast, Jose's invention. The thing that makes the Jose the Jose Master. So that's in its slot. Oh. Hopefully not snap a tendon over my elbow again today. I don't want to do that again. That was still kind of tingly today. All right. So we got this, then we got bass, middle, and treble. So we get our potentiometers out. So the bass is a 1 meg. All right, so let's verify that this is a 1 meg. Yes, it is. Get out our hardware out of the bags. I mean, this is ridiculous, I think, in some ways, the way they send you potentiometers. It's like 1 bag for each part. Come on. Can we just shove it all in 1 bag? Becomes just ridiculous. You end up with so many baggies when you do this. It's like I'm wondering when the police are going to come and think I'm like some kind of pot dealer. Here's my garbage can. Is usually full of tons of these small baggies when I try to save them for things, but how many of them do you need, right? All right, so let's grab 2 more. We actually need 3 in total. 3 more 1 meg potentiometers. All right, so we have, let's verify them again. That's a 1 meg. That is 1 meg. That is also a 1 meg. And we'll just get our lock washers put on them. Okay. Dump out our little finishing washers and our nuts. And then we'll just put them in place, each one. All right, so we have the bass, middle, treble. We have 1 volume control right here, which is a 1 meg audio. This camera wasn't blocking my giant head. I could probably see what I'm doing here. Yep. Seems to be a common sound these days. Grab the other 1 meg audio for volume control numero 20, right? And the third one goes up in this slot here, and I tilt it to the side so that the solder lugs aren't hanging above the chassis, right? Aren't protruding above the chassis. Just put them on the side like that. All right, and now what we need is the middle and treble. So a 25K, and we also have to do the presets. All right, so let's grab those. Let's see, what are these? These are the 250s. 250K. Audio taper. Borns. So they gave us a lot of extra hardware there. So there's the 250K. Just need one of these things. All right, and one of these things. And then we can mount it. Okay. Now we have our 25Ks, of which we need 2 of them. So these are Borns as well, but they're actually have a smaller body, because it doesn't seem that Borns is making, or I can't seem to find anymore, of the full body 25Ks as well. I'm sure I'll be able to find them at one point, but this is, I guess, COVID times, right, as they say, so we have to deal with what we have access to. But these are really good, and I've also, you know, if you've been around enough vintage Marshalls, I'm sure you've seen that they occasionally had to use 25Ks that were of different sizes as well, or 250Ks. You'll often see on plexis one pot that's smaller body size than the others, right? And they were building in the 60s, and obviously, you know, the 60s and 70s too. Well, that was sort of like what we're in now. Everything was kind of bunky. Nothing was that great, right? Everything was all messed up. All right, so now this 25K is going on the back, so we need to chase out the hole that we had there originally put in through the plexi, right? So I'm going to go ahead and basically start a pilot hole through there. Then I'm going to grab my unibit, right? And I'm just going to chase it out to get all of the, to get the plexi cut exactly to the hole, right? So I'm going to use the vacuum as well at the same time. So I like to use the vacuum this way. So I'll put it right here and then drill through, and the vacuum will suck up all the plastic and I won't have to vacuum up it again. So here we go. So there we have it. Now we can mount our presence control the way Jose did on the back. I had to go one more. There we go. Grab the nut and washer. So there we go. So that's ready. I'm gonna get my hardware, put it all aside. And just review really quickly that we got everything where we need it. So we have our Jose, bass, middle, treble, volume, preamp, presence. We have everything ready to go. So I think that's good for right now. I'm going to continue with this, but I think this is a good chunk to sort of put up on the site, on the channel. And the next upload will be, you know, basically putting all the interconnects on the potentiometers. I'm going to do maybe some cable work, shielded cable work low to the chassis underneath the board. We'll start putting the board in and we'll go from there. So we're getting close to the finish line where we're going to be able to demo this thing out up in the submarine studio, hopefully this weekend. So once again, Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.